this presentation could be called, instead of the title, it could also be called, instead of a problem related to the teaching of academic writing, I could also call it writing assignments that bypass the plague of plagiarism. My introduction is that as children, we learn to talk by listening and imitating the people around us for about 7 or 8 years. That's how we learn to talk. And we learn to speak a second language basically the same way. Maybe it doesn't take 7 or 8 years. Some people, depending on how much they spend with the people that speak the second language, it takes them a shorter amount of time. If a person spends the time only with Spanish-speaking person and that person is trying to learn English, it's going to take longer because they don't have people to practice with. But it's basically the same way. Learning to write, however, takes more effort than learning to speak. Learning to write takes more effort than learning to speak, because it takes even more effort to learn to write in a second language. It takes even more effort to learn to write in a second language. To learn to write in a second language, we have to know correct spelling. We have to know the meaning of words. And then the big one. We have to know the ways in which words, phrases, and clauses are arranged, the way in which they are arranged to create different types of sentences, which is what we have been trying to do. And so we can learn how to arrange words and phrases and clauses by reading carefully, consciously, how other people write so that we can imitate them. When I say reading consciously, I mean that we must study other people's writings in 2 ways. First, we must understand what they say. And that means looking up words, understanding all the words that they use. And secondly, we must study how they say it. How they say it. Which means, so that we can then try to write the same type of sentences. Ironically, here is where the problem that I'm discussing today begins. Okay? So I want to explain that to you. At the start of the semester, I told you that in this advanced EL2 class, we were going to concentrate on academic writing. That's what I told you. And I showed you a chart from my book, A Blueprint for Sentence Variety, that compares first-person writing and academic writing. This is the first section of that chart. I showed you on one side what the characteristics of first-person writing, and on the other side, I showed you the characteristics of academic writing. And you can see that first-person writing focuses on the experiences of the writer. And the examples come from the writer's experience. And so here, the writer is the expert. The writer is the expert because he or she knows what happened. And so they are the experts. But over here, the writer focuses primarily on a topic or subject that the writer is interested in, but the writer is not the expert. The topic may not be based on his or her experience. For example, sexual harassment. Maybe a person has the experience of having been sexually harassed, and in that way they have information. But on the statistics for sexual harassment and other things pertaining to the topic, quotations and things like that, the writer will not be an expert. And because the writer is not an expert, then something else has to happen. But in first-person writing, we are the experts. We know what has happened, and everything comes from us. But in academic writing, we are not the experts. So we have to depend on people who know more about the topic or subject than we do. Okay? A person who has been, if I continue with the topic of example of sexual harassment, a person may know about being personally harassed, but maybe the person does not know about the march of women that took place after the inauguration. Maybe the person has not read the article from Time magazine on the silence breakers. And so that person has to rely on what other people have said. And that's what characterizes academic writing. So this is why in academic writing we often have to explain what other people have written. Which involves the skill of summarizing, which we have been practicing. This is why I began by asking you at the beginning of the semester to write a summary of an oral presentation, such as a TED Talk. Then I asked you to write a summary of the article, Why Humans Can Talk, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And then you have written 3 separate summaries of 3 parts of the Time magazine article, The Silent Breakers, correct? All right. And now, when we began summarizing, to demonstrate how to summarize correctly, I showed you a 2-column chart where I had pasted individual sentences from the article, Why Walking Helps Us Think. Here's the first sentence from that chart. I showed you this sentence. When we go for a walk, the heart pumps faster, circulating more blood and oxygen, not just to the muscles, but to the organs, including the brain. This comes directly from the article, original sentence. And I told you that in order for us to summarize correctly, we had to create a sentence that looks different from this. And so I told you that we had to pay special attention to verbs so that we would not use those same verbs. And in this sentence that includes 2 gerunds, I underlined them and I highlighted them to make sure that when I summarize this sentence, put it in my own words, I would not use the gerunds like that. And so my summary sentence begins with a gerund, but it's not one of these. And I have a gerund as a subject. Walking strengthens the heart by forcing it to pump more blood into our muscles, our body organs, and our brain. I believe that my sentence looks different from this one, and so I showed it to you as an example of a correct summary. The second sample, for example, was this, from the original sentence. Many experiments have shown that after or during exercise, even very mild exertion, people perform better on tests of memory and attention. And again, I underlined the verbs to show you that I would not use them in trying to summarize this sentence. And so my sentence said, people who exercise regularly, even for a short period of time, have a better memory and longer attention span. A large number of experiments have verified this fact. And my summary actually has 2 sentences. And I told you that sometimes when we are summarizing, our summary sentences end up being a little longer than the original. So this is what we have been doing. And about 2 weeks ago, I just had this, I went home and I thought, it's not working. It's not really working. Because the difficulties involved. And I kind of had an idea of why it was so difficult. And the reason it was so difficult was because of this. I was asking you first to explain what a writer had said without using the writer's sentence structure, right? Without using the writer's verbs, without using the writer's gerunds, the way that the writer had used them, so that your sentence would look different. This is the first thing that I asked you. But then, I didn't show you what other alternative structures you could use to summarize. I just told you, hey, summarize this, and your sentence cannot look like the original writers. And you were kind of on your own. You have to think about how to come up with a sentence that's summarized without looking like the original. A hard thing to do, especially when you are not an experienced writer. And so this is why I thought, man, it is so difficult. I have to come up with something different. And because not only that, the results were not good. And really the results should not have surprised me, because too many of you ended up using the writer's words. You know, you would have the same structure and you try to change just some of the words, and that was not correct. Which means, you left the structures of the original writer. So in doing that, it meant that many of you plagiarized. And really, in most cases, you had no other option, I guess, because when you did try to come up with a different way to say what the writer had written, the summary sentence of too many of you had significant sentence errors. You tried to say it in a different way, but your sentences had significant sentence errors. So that's what the problem is. Okay? All right. So I've been thinking about this problem, and I've been teaching for 35 years. And the way that I have taught you is the way most teachers teach. And after 35 years, I thought, I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with it. So I want to tell you how I want to deal with the problem. How I want to deal with the problem. First, we're going back to first person writing. The writing in which you are experts. That's why today I gave you the homework assignment to write a composition about a family problem, or to write a composition about an accident, a terrible accident that you know about, because you will have all the information. Okay? All right, so that's the first thing we're going to do. And today we looked at one sample first person composition. That composition had 48 dependent clauses. And before you leave, so that you can see it better, I have, we identified them in class with brackets and stuff. I have them underlined, so that when you write yours, I'm going to put them right here by Maria, so that when you write your first person composition during the Easter vacation, when you are writing it, you will have the sample composition with you, with all those dependent clauses, so that you can try to include the same type of dependent clauses into your first person composition. And you know what? You will not be plagiarizing. You will not be plagiarizing, because your composition about a problem will be different from the sample composition that we looked at today. Do you see that? Okay. So that solves that problem. Now, we're not going to stop summarizing. We're not going to stop summarizing, but we're going to do it differently. We're going to do it differently. When I ask you to summarize the next article, you will not write a summary of the whole article. outside of class. You will not do that. Because you will do what you have been doing. You will either change some of the words, leave the same structures, which means you're going to be plagiarizing and gives me a headache and makes me upset, or you are going to try to create your own sentences and you're going to have a difficult time doing it without looking at alternative sentence structures. But the way that we are doing it now, you're going to have an example. But anyway, I'm talking about something different here. I'm talking about summarizing. So the way we are going to summarize, you will summarize sections, specific sections of an article. Okay? And you will not have the article available to you. The only thing you will have with you are notes. You will have notes on a piece of paper, and maybe you will write a quote or two that you are going to put in your summary. But you are not going to be summarizing the whole article, because you're going to be doing it in class. And maybe I will give you an hour to do it, half the class to do it. You understand what I'm saying? And we need to cover, for example, in the rest of the semester, we need to cover the rest of the punctuation rules. We've talked about some. We need to cover quotations, and we need to cover conjunctive adverbs. So when you summarize a section of an article in class, I will ask you, let's try to come up with some sentences that have conjunctive adverbs, or let's try to come up with a section of the summary that has a quotation or two. And so I'll give you specific tasks to do as you summarize a section of the article. Okay? I may or may not tell you which section you're going to summarize. I have to think about it. But you're going to summarize a section, not the entire thing. All right, very good. So, in this way, you will continue to practice academic writing, but in a more focused way during class. Okay? So, to sum up, you will write first-person compositions to continue to develop your ability to write different types of sentences. First-person compositions where I show you a model, a sample, and then you take that with you, and you can look at that model as much as you want, because your composition is going to be about something else. And you will continue to develop your academic writing skills by writing in-class summaries of a section of an article. Okay? If I am right in following this two-step approach, first-person compositions, summarizing sections of articles, if I am right in this approach, you and I will no longer have to worry about plagiarism.
That's right.
And that's a big, big accomplishment. Thank you. I think this is the first applause I've been receiving.
Because we love your idea.
Have a good vacation.